Hello everyone, welcome to the series summarizing the novel Lord of the Mysteries on the AniMonolith channel. Continuing previous parts, Klein divines for Glassy, warning him against investing in Monivus's seemingly profitable but risky venture involving an iron ore project. Glassy remains skeptical despite Klein's caution. Later, Klein meets Joyce Meyer, who seeks interpretation for his recurring nightmare. Joyce recounts a vivid dream of being pulled from a blood-red sea after a chaotic accident on the boat Medicago, where he lets go of a man named Yoon Kim, leading to Kim's death. Klein explains that such dreams could be spiritual messages revealing overlooked details. Through questioning, Klein guides Joyce to realize that the unnatural, escalating violence during the accident felt as if driven by hidden forces and that Kim's behavior might have held important clues. The story then shifts to Empress Borough, where Audrey awakes early in the morning and instructs her dog, Susie, to guard her from interruptions as she prepares for an important ritual. Ever since drinking the potion, Audrey and Susie had become beyonders, making them allies. Understanding Audrey's command, Susie responded with a knowing action. Audrey chose her bathroom as the ritual site, clearing the rectangular table of bottles and moving ritual items like candles, offerings, and a white robe into the room. After everything was prepared, she shut the bathroom door. As a mysticism enthusiast, Audrey had studied numerous magical rituals and owned an array of supplies, including purified water, royal jelly, aromatic oils, and incense she had made herself. This allowed her to quickly gather the necessary items described by Mr. Fool. However, while performing the ritual she felt so comfortable that she fell asleep. After dozing off in the bathtub until Susie reminded her, Audrey finally refocused on the ritual. She placed 4 candles at the corners of the table, lit them in sequence, and used a silver knife dipped in coarse salt, as she recited the incantation in Hermes. Audrey carefully followed every step, wielding the sacred blade to release spiritual energy and sensing a spiritual barrier forming around her, keeping away impurities and distractions. Maintaining her spectator state to avoid letting excitement affect the ritual, Audrey bowed with reverence and chanted the official incantation she had learned from Mr. Fool. As she finished, a mysterious wind blew within the spiritual barrier, and she noticed the crimson star on the back of her hand glowing. Despite her surprise, Audrey remained composed and made her heartfelt plea. Meanwhile, in the Sonia Sea, Alger wore his storm's robe and quietly muttered an incantation from the 4th gathering, hoping to uncover Mr. Fool's identity. Even though he knew that the old Tudor Empire warship he was commanding had many hidden secrets and potential dangers, he still wanted intending to use the ship as a test for Mr. Fool's power. Alger informed his small crew that they would soon reach the Rorstad archipelago and dock there for a day. The crew was overjoyed, as the self-operating ship did not need a large crew, yet the long sea voyage had left them physically and mentally exhausted. Meanwhile, Klein was reading the newspaper on a public carriage to Zutland Street when he suddenly felt a wave of phantom screams and whispers. The noise was overwhelming, making his forehead throb. Realizing something was wrong, Klein noticed 4 black marks on his right hand from the luck-changing ritual, which then quickly faded away. He deduced that the Hanged Man and Justice had attempted the ritual, proving that Mr. Fool's incantation could indeed reach through the gray fog. However, Klein knew he was still too weak to hear their exact pleas. He resolved to test the ritual himself that evening but first headed to Blackthorn Security Company for his job. Upon arrival, Klein met Captain Dunn, who handed him a wanted notice and explained that a dangerous beyonder had entered Tingen. As Klein examined the portrait, Dunn mentioned that the man, Trissy, was suspected to be a Sequence 8 instigator from the Secret Order and was the main suspect in the Medicago massacre. Witnesses had last seen him departing Anmap port for Tingen, but his current location was unknown. Recalling his dream interpretation of Joyce Meyer, Klein promptly said, "Captain, I know someone who might be a key witness." Dunn calmly replied that he was already aware of this, having learned from the Machinery Hivemind Unit's investigation into Joyce's dream. This confirmed Trissy's involvement in the massacre. Though disappointed at missing the chance to earn credit, Klein quickly gathered himself and inquired about Sequence 8 instigators and the Secret Order. Dunn considered this for a moment before saying, "It's time you learn more about Beyonders and the secret organizations." Klein then took the signed document from Dunn that permitted him to access classified materials stored in the armory managed by Old Neil. When Old Neil learned of this, he agreed that Klein urgently needed to gain knowledge about Beyonders and related topics. This was especially important since Old Neil planned to take Klein to the black market the following evening. Although Klein was surprised by Neil's sudden decision, he suspected the reason was that Neil wanted to use the money he had earned from the magical ritual to pay off his debts. Thus, Klein didn't ask further but requested Neil to retrieve some essential documents from the Chinese gate. The armory, although it housed many archaeological and historical materials, contained limited information about Beyonders and secret organizations, most of which were basic knowledge. When Old Neil brought back a stack of documents and asked Klein to read them on site, Klein quickly agreed and began flipping through the pages to get an overview. He noted that the content was highly detailed, befitting the internal records of the Nighthawks, an organization under the church with a history spanning 3,000 to 4,000 years, or even longer. As Klein skimmed through, he found that the documents not only introduced various secret organizations but also listed many sequence pathways. Some sequences were complete, while others only listed the corresponding potion names, or in some cases, described the abilities of Beyonders without naming the potions. Others were entirely missing, with only blank entries. Klein suppressed his excitement as he turned to the Sequence 4 seer. However, his joy quickly faded when he discovered that the potion names for Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 of Seer were not listed. Fortunately, the documents did describe the abilities of Beyonders at these sequences. The description for Sequence 8 read, Beyonders of Sequence 8 are skilled in deceptive combat techniques and are highly cunning. Reading this, Klein felt it didn't align with the progression of a seer. After all, Beyonders who chose the seer sequence were meant to support their teammates, not engage in direct combat. Numerous questions swirled in Klein's mind, and he even wondered if the Nighthawks records were inaccurate. He set aside his doubts and continued to read the description of Sequence 7. Beyonders of this sequence can perform various spells rapidly, combining their own skills with supernatural powers. Klein breathed a sigh of relief and thought, this is more fitting for the progression of a seer. After examining the examples of Sequence 7, Klein proceeded to the overall summary of the pathway. This sequence pathway originated with the Zeril family of the Solomon Empire during the Fourth Epoc's conflicts. Although the family hasn't been completely wiped out, their name still occasionally appears in the history of the Fifth Epoch. They are suspected to be connected to the ancient organization known as the Secret Order. The mention of the Zeril family immediately reminded Klein of the contents of Emperor Rozel's diary he had read earlier. In it, Rozel had written about the acting method, which he learned from a mysterious person named Zerdal and regretted not choosing the seer sequence. Klein felt that this was destiny. He read and reread this section several times before moving on to explore other records. Klein searched for information about the Sailor sequence, which indeed belonged to the Church of the Lord of Storms. The Nighthawks records, belonging to the Church of the Evernight Goddess, detailed this old adversary clearly. Sequence 8 was called Folk of Rage, and Beyonders of this sequence, when enraged, could unleash attacks far beyond normal, with greatly enhanced strength and speed. Sequence 7 was Seafarer, whose Beyonders were scholars of astronomy and geography, with an innate sense of magnetic fields, ocean currents, wind directions, and cloud patterns. A ship with a seafarer on board would never get lost at sea. While on the ocean, these Beyonders received enhancements in all directions. They could also move freely underwater for over half an hour and use water-related spells within limits. After reading about these sequences, Klein concluded that seafarers were indeed powerful. He quickly connected this to the Hanged Man's abilities, based on aura observations and signs of a Beyonder's advancement. Klein suspected that the Hanged Man wasn't part of the mandated Punishers but rather a pirate secretly employed by the Church of the Lord of Storms. From the Hanged Man's previous discussions and gatherings, Klein confirmed that the records of Sequence 7 were accurate. He then continued reading about other sequences. The sequence pathway that Justice had chosen and planned to advance was Spectator. Like Seer, Spectators lack direct combat abilities, relying on observing targets to gather information and subtly guiding events in a desired direction. Sequence 8, Telepathist, was a comprehensive upgrade from Spectator, allowing observation beyond surface details into the realms of mystical auras and the ether body. In the presence of a telepathist, it was hard to keep secrets. Sequence 7 was Psychiatrist, who could directly influence targets, treating mental issues or driving people to madness. Klein concluded that Beyonders who chose this pathway were highly unpredictable. Klein then read about the Church of Steam and Machinery, as the Sequence Savant, chosen by Emperor Rozel, belonged to this church. Beyonders of this sequence believed that knowledge was power, with a basic understanding of mysticism and expertise in machinery and engines. Klein also read about Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 as upgrades of Savant but no useful information. Since Klein's rank in the Nighthawks was still low, he was restricted to Sequence 7 information. Feeling increasingly curious, Klein hoped that the sealed artifact 2-049 would arrive from Backlund soon to determine if Ray Bieber was indeed a descendant of the Antigonus family. If so, Klein might become an official member and gain higher security clearance. As Klein scanned familiar sequences chosen by Nighthawk's members at Blackthorn, he finally found 2 sequences mentioned with regret in Emperor Roselle's diary, Apprentice and Marauder. Sequence 9 Apprentice resembled a magician, rarely trapped and always having a way to escape. Sequence 9 Marauder was hard to distinguish from ordinary thieves, though their methods were more advanced. Their thefts weren't for pleasure or survival but seemed to fulfill a mission. Sequence 8 Trick Master enjoyed deceiving others. As Klein pondered the power of manipulation, he recalled Trissy, the suspect behind the boat massacre, who was believed to be in Sequence 8, Instigator. Reading the abilities of an instigator, expert in inciting others' dark desires, escalating conflicts, and triggering massacres, Klein fully believed in Trissy's involvement. However, the lower-level Sequence 9 assassin seemed odd, as its combat abilities didn't align with the manipulative nature of higher sequences.